Hey everybody, and welcome back to Empty Pockets Ironworks. Thank you for joining me this week with this midweek video. I'm going to do the scrap iron project today, but I want to touch on something that's been brought up numerous times in personal messages, comments. People ask me all the time, what type of plasma cutter do I use? And I figured I'd show you, and not sponsored, not endorsed by any means. But this has honestly proven to be one of, if not the most valuable piece of equipment in my shop. Now a little backstory. When I was looking for a plasma cutter, when I was talking about getting a plasma cutter, back when Empty Pockets Ironworks was still in its conception stages, everybody told me, you get what you pay for. Now I get it. I mean, most of my tools in this shop, for the most part, are name brand. And even though they're not particular to any one name brand, there's a bunch of different brands in this shop. I've got everything from Porter Cable, DeWalt, Cobalt, Hobart, of course my Lincoln electric welder. We've got a Century MIG here. Just a vast array of what works and what was affordable to me at the time. Now with that being said, this is an extremely affordable unit. I got it on sale, and I think I paid like around $250 shipped to my door. And the Cut-40 DC inverter plasma cutter from Jegs was just, I took a chance on it. And I'll be honest with you, I ordered it, we got one here, hooked it up, which is super simple. I'll show you guys a picture here in just a bit of the back side of this thing. And as soon as I hooked it up, eager to try it, flip the power switch on, nothing. Now, real quickly, I'm sure that this is not manufactured in the United States. If you look online, there is a bevy of almost an unsurmountable, it's mind-boggling the amount of plasma cutters that you can bring up when you type in the words affordable, cheap, affordable and cheap. I mean, we're Empty Pockets Ironworks. So anyway, I wanted something that was in my budget. I didn't want to break the bank, and I didn't know if it was going to be something that I would use all the time. Got to looking around, looked at several different Chinese or Eastern made plasma cutters. Didn't really see anything that I liked, didn't really see anything that I trusted, because a lot of times on the websites themselves, a lot of the text is not in American or English, and so it made my decision making a little difficult. I just happened to be thumbing through one of the Jegs catalogs that I had laying around and found an ad for the Pro Cut-40. So I look it up online. It just happened to be on sale. We ordered it. We get it here. Like I said, hooked it up, didn't work. Okay, no power. Took the sides off of it, which has just got screws, and the whole top lifts off. I looked inside, and as soon as I looked inside, I realized that I was in over my head. Now, I'm a technical maintenance technician. Wiring, that sort of thing, diagnosing problems, usually not a big deal. This was a little out of my league. It may not be out of yours. Regardless, what I'm getting at is we contacted customer service. They had me a box within 48 hours with a brand new one with extra shipping boxes to ship the other one back. They made sure that I was not without, and I contacted them again, told them thank you, and the next one, this one, I've had it now for almost 2 years, and it has worked phenomenally. Now, as I mentioned, this is a DC inverter. It's 110-220. When I first started, just with the shop in its infancy, I didn't have 220 ran from the box. I had spaces for it, but in my haste to get things done, I hadn't wired in 220 yet, or a plug. The Century MIG that I was using at the time was 110. Didn't have a need for 220. So anyway, we hook it up, running it with this that comes with it, which is extremely heavy duty. And I would run it at that time at around 22, 23, maybe 24 on the amperage. and I was running it at about 50 psi. And it would cut 14 gauge smoothly, relatively quickly. I did, as a new beginner with working with this plasma cutter, I did tend to outrun my arc. And, you know, I made the rookie mistakes and that sort of thing. But, all that aside, I basically built the beginning portions of Empty Pockets Ironworks, for what it's worth, everything that involves plasma cutting, with this machine. This machine, less than $300, has paid for itself probably 10 times over, just in the last year alone. So, did I get lucky with buying something that you get what you pay for? I looked at everything. I'm a big Lincoln Electric fan. I love Lincoln welders. I love Lincoln equipment. If I could get sponsored by Lincoln, that would be amazing, but they probably don't even know I exist. Regardless, I wanted a Tomahawk or something like that that has onboard air. But being in the position that we are, with being a new business and being small, I can't front $1,000. I can't front $1,200. I can't front $4,500 for equipment and that sort of thing. Everything has to be strategically planned. So if you're like me and you're on a budget, I just want to say that this might be the way to go. So with that being said, it is very simple operation. I'll zoom in or take pictures of it and show you guys in a little bit. I've got a air-water separator that's just a cobalt. And I bought it at the same time that I bought my cobalt compressor. And in all honesty, to be plasma cutting, material thickness is up to 1/4 inch, and this thing will handle it like a beast. And I'm going to prove that to you guys in a little bit. Between the air compressor and the plasma itself and extra consumables, I've got less than $500. And for that, to be able to make something out of a $35 sheet of material that you can turn around and sell for profit, it has proven to be extremely valuable piece of equipment for me. So with that, I'm going to do some demonstrations. We'll do some 14 gauge, I believe we'll do some 1/8 inch, we'll do some 3/16, and we'll do some 1/4. Now there's not a big difference between any of those, but I'm going to try to stair step it up, cut, and I'll use the same tip throughout so that you guys can see what the cut looks like. And then we'll do a small project for one of my orders, and with that we'll do it in real time, and I'll just let the camera run. This may be a long video because of all the excess talking, but I'll let it run so that you guys can see in real time how fast it actually cuts through 14 gauge. So yeah, with that, I'm going to show you guys around. I know this is a different break again from the type of videos that I normally do, but I'm not big on product reviews. Maybe I should be. If this video is well received, then maybe I'll do more product reviews in the future. I'm super happy with my Cobalt air compressor. This little welder here is a complete joy to weld with. I mean, I've used the big blues and everything else in my 20 plus years as a welder. And in all honesty, that little welder there, I hate to say it, but I would stack it up against some of the bigger machines that cost 3 times as much. So, I don't know, is it user? Maybe, but honestly I think the machine helps a lot. So, anyway, let's get started. Before we get started with the rest of this, I wanted to show you 2 of my main gripes about the setup. First off is this ground clamp. It's relatively cheap in the way that it's made. In fact, the braid has already come undone from one side. I think it's getting ready to fall out of the other. But that's easily remedied with, you know, a $5 to $10 ground clamp from your local weld shop. I just have never had a need to replace it, and in all honesty, I've cut up almost entire sheets running at almost 30 amps, and it's never gotten hot. And I've never gotten shocked either. My biggest gripe about the whole setup, and I'm sure I can change the gun, is the fact that the button is on the back. Now, I typically, with a glove, hold it like this and then push down with my thumb. Use this hand as a guide, but it will fatigue the back of your thumb in the joint after prolonged use. I would have liked to have had a trigger, but for the price and the fact that it's lasted for as long as it has, I can't complain. Now, one of the big perks to this is the consumables. If you get online, say eBay, different sources like that, you can buy multiple packs. They come with about 10 of each piece, or 12. It equals out to about 60 pieces for about $20. Now what that consists of is it comes with a double-sided electrode. So once one side gets burned out, you can switch it over. It has a swirler ring, a cap, which this is typically what burns out the most. Depending on how you have your machine set up, if you have the correct air pressure, amperage, I mean just a whole bunch of different factors that I'm not going to get into in this video. This is usually what goes out. But luckily in the multi-packs they send a ton of these. And then last but not least, you have the ceramic, which honestly you never have to change. I've probably got 50 of these laying around just because I've bought other kits, and I never have to change them unless I accidentally drop the gun itself and it shatters. But that's just carelessness on my part. So real quickly here before we get started, I just wanted to show you guys the interface on the front of this machine. Real simple. You've got a valve adjustment right here. It's got a lockout. Very typical. I tend to cut pretty much everything at about 34 amps. Now if I'm cutting something like 18 gauge or 20 gauge, then I'll take that down quite a bit. But as a general rule of thumb in my shop, with the PSI that I'm running with this particular machine, all machines are probably going to vary, and I would assume that being manufactured as this is, the tolerances and the specs and the cycle and duty times and that sort of thing probably aren't real exact. I haven't never put a meter on it, and I honestly don't care to. It works. Why try to diagnose it? With that, just a simple rocker on off. Okay, for this portion here, I'm just going to demonstrate the cuts. We're going to start with 14 gauge, go up to 3/16, and I've got a little scrap of 1/4 inch plate here. Now you can see I've already cut this before. And for being the type of machine that it is, it's a relatively clean cut for being handheld. So we'll demonstrate this real quick. First, the 14 gauge. Now this metal has obviously not been cleaned. I'm not grinding off any mill scale. If you do grind off the mill scale, it will help, but let's get started. Now that little jump in the electrode there at the first was me. I actually moved away from the material. And you can push the button down and then come into it and contact just like a table. In fact, I'll demonstrate that here. So, not bad for being handheld. The run on with this to cool the tip usually lasts about 5 seconds. Now we'll move on to the 3/16. As you can see, very minimal slag, easily chipped off or ground off. Now moving up to the 1/4. see 2 jackalopes. I'm going to cut these out for my wife, but I'm going to do this first one, and I'm going to do it in real time. We'll do this in one recording. That way you can see how long it takes and where I start and stop. And that is another issue that I wanted to bring up with this machine. Or not necessarily an issue, it's a nice feature. I don't know exactly what it's called, but if you have gaps in between material, it doesn't really cut off and cut back on, or I guess it should say it doesn't have a delay, which is nice. I know some machines, they take a little bit to reset before you can actually squeeze the trigger and go again. This machine seems to handle things perfectly. So when I'm cutting out my blanks for my roses, it's really beneficial because I can go from one petal to another and not have to wait for the machine. Now, I did get a little sloppy on some of it, but that was not any fault of the machine, that was user error. Alright, so there you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know there was an exuberant amount of talking throughout. Like I said, I really don't know how to do this. This is my first product review. Either way, a few key points to touch on. Like I said, that's a 120, 220 DC inverter plasma. I currently, and I didn't mention it earlier, I currently now, which you probably assumed, run it via 220, which allows me to, with a 40 amp breaker, run it at the 35 amp range without it kicking the breaker. I think for a hobbyist, for a new entrepreneur, anybody that's wanting to start a small grassroots business for themselves, anything along that lines, anything where you have to be conscious of your spending and you don't have the money to throw out towards those more expensive machines, I think the Jegs Cut-40 is really honestly a good starter for anybody that's looking into getting something in their shop to plasma cut with. Remember to hit that like button, of course. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Check out our other content videos where we actually build things. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I probably won't do these very often, so those of you that are regulars to my channel, don't worry. This won't be a common thread. Maybe once a month sort of thing. So, if even that. I mean, I can't afford new equipment all the time, so, I mean, what am I going to do? Start showing you screwdrivers? Either way, I hope you all enjoyed it. I will see you guys very soon. Thank you.